Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So today is the day I call move-in day. And it's kind of like when your kids go back to college or whatever. Oh, and by the way, Iowa football, especially the offense, has been stinking the last 3 weeks. But let me say this. I love Iowa. I love the university. It's a great school. It really is. But, I'm never a big fan of nepotism. And, I think somebody needs to fire Kirk Ferentz's son. And maybe, and man, with God as my witness, that boy is not the heir apparent, okay? That guy is not, he had, honestly, I didn't even play football as a kid. I played soccer. I played a lot of touch football, or tackle without equipment, just that kind of football. But I kind of understand a little bit of stuff. And I'm telling you right now, if you gave me the Iowa offense, I guarantee that I could figure out how to get them to score 7 points against Purdue and 7 points against Wisconsin. And you wouldn't even have to pay me like $1 million. Like Iowa has some really highly paid assistants. I'm not saying Junior there is making $1 million, but it's probably pretty damn close. Just not. I mean, come on. How hard is it to say, okay, all right, you 6 guys block, everybody else go out and get open, and I'm gonna throw it to you. I mean, that's that's a play, right? Like, you don't even have to figure anything. Who cares what the defense is? Who cares how many guys are in the box, or if they got a cover 2 or any of that mess? Just get open. I'm gonna hit you. So I haven't given up faith on the school. I actually think that we should fire some of the football coaches and pay the wrestling coaches a little bit extra to come out there and coach football. Why? Because even though wrestling and football are slightly different, the Iowa wrestling coaches, I know, have a killer instinct. And that's kind of what the football team needs. They win a big game against Penn State and then lose to a very average Purdue team. And oh, by the way, they have stunk it up against Purdue like 4 out of the last 5 years. So I'm not going to be patient about this because there's no excuse. We're wasting talent. If we didn't have good players, kids with talent, then it'd be a different story. But we're not VMI. So let's just get it together. By the way, Navy, a gutsy win on Friday night. Proud of them. Good job, guys. Okay, so it's move-in day, and move-in day is the day before I get back on the road. Now, this move-in day is a little more substantial because I've been home. I will have been home for like 10 days, which, by the way, is the longest period I've ever been home, even in between jobs, I think, since I've been in the trucking industry. I'm not a guy that spends a lot of time at home, but I like this setup better because I got to do a lot of things that I wanted to get accomplished around the house. We were kind of busy. We're just kind of, chilling out today, except for me getting the truck loaded up. But yeah, so I've washed my carpets, washed all my bedding. I wash my bedding on the road too. And every once in a while I'll wash one of the rugs on the road if I think it really is nasty. But I always wash all of the flooring stuff. I wash everything in the truck when I'm home. So I've sanitized the floor. I even clean underneath the mattress, and I lift up the lid to the coffin, with the storage space. I wipe down those shelves. I try to get everything nice and tidy because it gets nasty on the road. So yeah, so that's move-in day. I'll make up all the beds and get everything, all my clothes and everything in here, and get ready to go back on the road. I might even go crazy and clean the windows today because I can tell they're kind of nasty. Although I think we're fixing to get some rain here in a second. Anyway, oh, and the other thing I do is I start my truck. I start my truck, make sure my alternator's charging everything up, make sure my air compressor charges everything up, and then I shift over and get on the APU, which I've done today. And I'll leave the APU on tonight, so because I also make sure my fridge is cooling down so I can throw stuff in it in the morning before I head out. So anyway, that's my kind of, like, that's how I get ready to go on the road. I don't have a load yet, but that's okay. Because the first step is making sure the truck's ready. It doesn't matter where the load is. So anyway, I wanted to talk about something. You know, I've always said I'm big on empowering people, right? Whether it's in the workplace or just in society. And one of the things that I do is I often talk to people, right? And you know, that I just come across, like clerks at a store or at a you know, whatever, people in servers in restaurants, you know, people at a gas station, whatever it is, right? And you know, if they bring something up, I'll often follow up with questions or whatever and try to understand it. And like, excuse me, like one time there was this gal that was working at a Wawa down in Prince George's County, Maryland, and she was basically a one-armed bandit, right? Like she was working with her arm in a sling, and I said, hey, what happened to your arm? And she's like, oh, I fell, you know, I fell and I tore my rotator cuff. And I said, did you fall here at work? And she said, yeah. I said, why are you working then? I said, you should be on workers' comp and you should be home and you should be getting your shoulder treated. She's like, well, they're stalling and I can't afford to be without a check. And I said, give me a piece of paper. And she gave it to me, and I pulled the pen out because I was on my way to court. And I wrote a phone number down, and I wrote a guy's name on there. The guy's name is Ryan, and he's an attorney that I worked for when I was in law school. I worked for him and his dad and their firm. And he does workers' comp. And I said, you call this guy, and you tell him Terry said to call you. Well, you know, I didn't follow up. I said, but you need a lawyer. You should not be working. You need a lawyer. Call this guy. So she must have called him, because several months later, I got a check for like $2,000, which was like a referral fee that Ryan paid to me, because that's, you know, how lawyers kind of roll. So she must have had a pretty sizable case, because in the past I'd gotten checks maybe like $500 when I referred somebody for an auto accident or whatever. So she must have had a pretty good case, because he sent me $2,000. I was like, oh, sweet, it's like found money. But even if Ryan didn't send me any money, I don't care, because she was getting the short end of the stick, and I tried to empower her, and I did. So I was happy about that. But I met a woman yesterday at a CVS, and you know, this conversation wouldn't have happened but for the fact that when I went up to the counter, I asked her for something, and I said, hey, you know, I want to get my COVID booster shot. And I said, but they told me I had to come back at 10. And she's like, yeah, that's because the pharmacy doesn't open until 10. I'm like, oh, they're open right now. And she's like, oh, that's right. I've been working like 13-hour days, and I just can't keep anything straight right now. And I said, 13-hour days, you need a pay raise, right? And she's like, well, I just got a pay raise this year. And I said, so? I said, this company is making money hand over fist, right? It's CVS. Why shouldn't they pay you more? And I said, and if they won't, then just go find another job. She's like, well, who would run the place? I said, that's my point exactly. And I tried to explain to her that, you know, I said, look, I've negotiated contracts for thousands of people over the years. And she's like, oh, I'm not a contract employee, I'm salary. Now, the fact that she's salary kind of jumps out at me, because if she's working 13 hours a day it only takes her about a little over 3 days to hit 40 hours in a week, right? Because 3 13-hour days is 39 hours. But even if she's salary, and this is important for everybody to know, even if your salary, if you are working over 40 hours a week, you are entitled by law to overtime pay, okay? They can't say, oh, your salary's this much, and then just work you like 70 hours a week. Unless the salary is so high that it would be equal to the minimum wage in your state for the amount of hours that you work. So let's say you were working 70 hours a week, but your pay is like $70,000 a year. Then then you'd have to do the math. But here's the other thing. In Maryland, because this was in Maryland, Maryland's minimum wage now is probably, I'd have to check, but I know it's like north of $13 an hour now, okay? And it's on its way to 15. And in some counties, not the county I was in, but in some counties like Montgomery County, Maryland, which is closer to DC, they're probably already $15 an hour. So however many hours she was working, you multiply that by the minimum wage in the state, and if her weekly paycheck does not equal that, then she's getting screwed out of wages, and that's an actionable offense. And the reason I know this is because I've actually helped clients who had investigations done by the U.S. Department of Labor on this. But the other thing that was disconcerting is that, I said, well, you don't owe these people anything. You're an at-will employee. And she's like, well, I just couldn't leave. I'm 67. Where am I going to go? I'm like, Florida? I don't know. And she's like, well, that's just not my ethics. And I said, your ethics need to match the ethics of the people you're up against. I said, if you think this company cares about you, you are sadly mistaken. You're just naive. But it was so difficult to listen to this 67-year-old woman who's working crazy long hours at an employer that doesn't bother to hire enough help, and she doesn't have enough self-awareness, self-esteem. She doesn't place enough value in her services to really do anything about it. And that's kind of unfortunate, right? But I'm not going to stop trying to empower people. And I'm not going to stop telling people when they're getting screwed over. But here's my message. Don't be a sucker. A lot of times people say, oh, well, you prime drivers, you're hauling cheap freight. Well, that's an opinion, but cheap freight is kind of like, that's very subjective, right? But I know what I need to do to make money. And I think there's a lot of drivers in my position that do. They talk about how much we make or how much they get paid on a certain load. They know how much they need to make. But here's the thing. When you're at a company and you're doing the work of 2 employees, then you ought to be getting twice as much vacation as you're getting and twice as much pay. Don't be the person who, just keeps taking more and more responsibility on and not getting more and more pay. Like when I used to work at a hedge fund, and one time my bosses came to me and they're like, hey, Terry, we're gonna start this other project and we want you to head it up. I'm like, okay. And then I just paused. And they're like, oh yeah, and we're gonna bump your pay up. Because they knew what was coming, right? I liked the guys I worked for. They liked me. We got along great. But at the end of the day, I wasn't working for them. They made tons of money. I wasn't working for them out of charity. I was working for them because, I wanted to make money. That's how I made a living. And so they're like, oh yeah, well, yeah, we're making you take on this extra responsibility. We're gonna bump you up, $12,000 a year or whatever it was, And that's the thing you got to understand, that if you don't ask, you don't get. Employers are seldom, I was one of the people that did this, but employers seldom just give pay raises without being forced to. And let me say this real quick. I don't want to belabor this point, but if you started to look at other jobs and you go to your boss and you say, hey, I really like working here, but this other company has offered me, let's say you were making $17 an hour, and you go to them and it's basically a lateral move, but the other company is going to pay you $20 an hour, right? Which is like what is that, like a 35% pay increase? No, I did it back. 25%, around there. Now, anyway, it's pay. What am I saying? It's probably about 20%. I didn't take math in college, but they say, oh, we'll give you $20 an hour for basically a lateral move, same benefits, maybe a little bit better. And you go to your boss and you're like, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to leave. I want to give you my 2 weeks notice or whatever. And they say, oh, where are you going? And you say, oh, I'm going to so-and-so. And they're obviously going to recognize it as a competitor. And they're like, well, why are you leaving? And you're like, oh, they're paying $20 an hour. And they're like, oh, well, we'll pay you $20 an hour. Or better yet, they say, well, we can't do that, but we can do $19 an hour. Don't you dare say, oh, okay. Do not do them any favors. And even if they say they will match it, right? What you have to say out loud is, oh, I appreciate that, but you know, I just think it's time for a change. But in your mind, what you should be thinking is, you cheap bastards would not have offered me $20 an hour if I wasn't getting it from somebody else. See, because if they're willing to match it, that only means they're matching it to keep you. They're not matching it because they want to, because they like you, because they appreciate you. They're only matching it so they don't have to go out and hire somebody else. Now, if they come back and say, oh, we'll give you $22 an hour, then maybe you do stick around, right? But even if they match, you still should go to the other company. You know why? Because the other company's baseline with you is $20 an hour. But the job you're currently at, they now hate you because you actually wrung them out for another $3 an hour. And there are ways to get around that by, like, I don't know, cutting your hours, right? Sending you home early. Any number of things. So don't fall for it. Be a mercenary, ruthless SOB. Okay? Look out for number one and don't give in. Don't be a sucker. So anyway, I'll be back on the road tomorrow. Don't know where I'm going yet. And then I'll be getting out towards Springfield because I got to pick up my trainee, my co-driver Connie, and yeah, we'll be back on the road. So, like I said, don't be a sucker. Everybody be careful out there, and we'll see you back on the road. Bye. Hey, so I wanted to do a quick addendum to this video, and so the minimum wage in Maryland is, it turns out it's $11.75 an hour. As of January of this year. It's going to go up again in January, but it's $11.75 an hour if you have more than 15 employees, which obviously CVS does. So, but I also wanted to show an example because I wasn't really clear about how that overtime works. So here's what I did. I made a little, I just made a little quick drawing. So let's say somebody works 52 hours, okay? So 40 in a week, right? In a calendar week. Excuse me. So 40 hours are paid at $11.75. That equals $470, okay? But the other 12 hours have to be paid at time and a half, or at least calculated at time and a half, which is $17.62, which equals $211.44. So if their wages for the week are not at least $681.44, then they're undercompensated and they're being cheated. And $681.44 is $35,435 a year. But here's the thing. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, that's the average. If you work overtime in a week, the pay that you got for that week must be enough to cover the basic hourly wage plus time and a half for any overtime. So it doesn't matter. Let's say that somebody was getting paid, and the reason I know this is because I had a client who made this mistake. But let's say somebody was getting paid that $35,435, right? And some weeks they only work 40 hours, so they're well within the parameters. But other weeks they work 60 hours. During that 60-hour week, they have to be compensated fully for their work. It doesn't matter if later on the company's like, oh, well, they worked 60 hours that week, so next week we're only going to have them work 20 hours. So then it'll be 40 and 40. That's not a thing. So if your company does stuff like that, they're ripping you off. Okay, first of all, it's a shitty schedule, but they're ripping you off. So if somebody works over 40 hours in a week, they're entitled to overtime. It doesn't matter if they give you comp time the following week, okay? Don't fall for it. Lots of employers do this crap and they cheat their employees. Don't fall for it. And by the way, if you got questions about this, if you feel like, if you're watching this video and you feel like you're getting cheated, get a hold of me, because I can figure it out pretty quickly and I will be able to tell you if you should file a wage and hour claim. And oh, by the way, if they have cheated you and like the wage and hour division at the Department of Labor looks into it, not only are they going to have to pay you everything they owe you, they're going to have to pay you everything they owe you like that fast. Like that is a payment that they are going to have to come up with within like 5 days of being told that they underpaid you. And there's not going to be a lot of debate about it because the numbers don't lie. But the other thing is they're going to get penalized for it. And don't you dare let some company get away with this, because I guarantee if they're doing it to you, they're doing it to other people. Okay? Now, sometimes it's an honest mistake. Sometimes they just don't get it. They think they're hooking you up, giving you 60 hours one week and 20 hours the next. But they're not. Okay? So anyway, thanks for hanging in there and watching this. And like I said, if you know anybody that's in this situation, you know, talk to them. Let me know. I'll you know, give you information on how to you know, do something about it. Anyway, talk to you soon. Bye.